And welcome to another episode of the Rorschach Test Podcast. I am your host, Terrell James. Today I have a special guest with me, Susan Burton. How are you doing?
That's fine. Yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. For anybody who may not have seen the show, if it's your first time watching, what I do here is I put up a series of Rorschach or ink blot tests, and I ask my guests exactly what they see. And based off of what they see, I connect it to their passions and to the things that they do for a living. Um, so Susan Barton has written a book, and I'm going to let you talk about this. But she's written a book. So what I'm going to do is I'm connecting the things that she saw on these tests to her not only writing the book, but we're going to make kind of a psychological and an emotional connection to the book, to your journey, and to what exactly you're trying to accomplish with the book. But we're even going to kind of go back into even your childhood. I want to kind of dig a little bit. But before we get into all of that, I want you to just kind of tell me exactly the name of the book and what the book is about.
Well, the book is about a diabetic child. It's about the journey of this diabetic from a toddler all the way through adolescence. This particular diabetic was actually Latrice Hawkins Light, who's running for lieutenant governor at this time. She used to be a diabetic. She's no longer a diabetic, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The
Right.
book actually talks about her onset of becoming a diabetic. When she was diagnosed, she was 1 year old, and she was actually the first or the youngest diabetic in that age group. And being that young, she actually was exposed to having insulin injections 3 times a day because your body is constantly growing. And with your body growing, you have to adjust the insulin in order to keep that sugar level maintained. When she was diagnosed, I had taken her to the doctor, and the doctor said, okay, we're going to go through your standard lab test, having your A1C and whatnot. And he noticed that her glucose level was a little high. And he said, was she eating anything sweet this morning for breakfast? And I indicated that she hadn't. Long story short, they had us come back that afternoon for a retest, and the levels were higher than they were in the morning. And we had the option to take her to Children's Hospital or to Maryland, University of Maryland in Baltimore, and we elected Children's Hospital because, of course, it dealt more with children and children onset of diagnosis and disease and whatnot. So taking her to Children's Hospital, they indicated that her pancreas had stopped working, and she probably would have gone into a coma and succumbed to being a diabetic, meaning she would have gone into a coma and that would have been it. But we were learning to live with the actual diagnosis and being new to this diagnosis and technology not being what it is today. She actually first took pork insulin, and then she went on to beef insulin, and both were very, very strong. It actually even ate away at the fat tissues on her skin before they thought that, hey, humans needed to take a human insulin. And then she was able to go on to the human insulin. Now, to look at the lab side of it all, in order to keep everything maintained and recorded for accuracy of delivering the insulin, I had to have this, I guess it was like a chemistry set, because I would have these test tubes, and you would put these solutions into this test tube and wait to see how it reacts, and that would indicate how high or low her glucose was, and it would be like an acetone and a ketone test. And after we found out what the levels were, I'd have to make a journal of these 3 times a day that we took the injections. And this journal was very important because this was going to be the lifeline of how much insulin she would or would not need. The journal was then taken to Children's Hospital, or mailed, usually taken because that was faster just to take it in the car. to the endocrinology department. And then as technology changed, I was able to fax the information to the endocrinology department. Then I was able to email the information. And then, of course, came a point where I was able to keep a ledger in a Excel spreadsheet or Word document. And I'm saying that because it taught me that you had to know everything that was going on with your child, because it was going to dictate the outcome of any type of episode that she would have through life. Her episodes of chickenpox would be more severe than the average child. Any type of extraction of teeth would be more severe. The flu would be more severe. All of these things had to be documented so we would know how to adjust her insulin and how we would have to make other precautions if she had a fever or anything of that nature. And typically she would have to be hospitalized. She actually fell into ketoacidosis, which is a coma state. And you can go so far into a coma, either you're going to make it back out of the coma or you won't. But you don't want a diabetic to continuously have these type of episodes, because it actually destroys your brain cells when these episodes happen. I speak about the importance of documenting because that documentation is what has preserved her life thus far. I learned to capitalize on using more documentation for every member of my family and their medical health when I worked for Department of Defense. And what happened with Department of Defense, Congress mandated that every seaman, airman, boots on the ground would have an electronic record. This came about for Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. They didn't want the airmen, the soldiers, boots on the ground to go down range, which would be the battlefield, and have to worry about, hey, what happened to me? What type of medication was I on? What doctor did I see? None of these things they thought was something that the soldiers should have to maintain while they're out there serving their country. And what they did was they came up with these electronic records that would go through handheld devices, that would go through battalion aid stations and military treatment facilities. And I thought this was something that everyone needed to do for themselves and not just the military. You need to know exactly what is going on with your health. A lot of people, you'll say, hey, if you're not feeling good, you need to go to the doctor, and then the doctor will give you some medication or he will construct some type of treatment plan. Well, you need to take that information from that doctor, and then you need to make sure that that intervention, if you will, is working to your advantage. And if it's not, it's up to you to tell the doctor that some adjustments need to be made. It's up to you to say, hey, whether it's working or whether it's not working. These are things that I had done for Latrice her whole life, and it was what had sustained her. Being a diabetic as a female is completely different from being a diabetic that is a male, especially when you are insulin dependent, because that estrogen is different from the testosterone. When you have your monthly cycle, things of these natures, it brings about more worry, it brings about more pain. It puts you in a different emotional state, which means the amount of insulin that you need is going to depend on what state you're in. You can use more or less energy depending on what's going on with your life. And I tell people, if you're not used to documenting, if you're not used to using a Word document, you can pretty much use your cell phone. If you're sending a message to your partner or to someone who's a caregiver to say how you're feeling, you're creating that electronic record. You can also use that electronic record when you go to the doctor because it's date stamped. You can say, this is what happened to me on this day and this is how I felt. And based on this information, there may need to be some adjustment in my medication. Then I want to also point out it's a spiritual journey as well, because you're depending on God to get you through these episodes, some more emotional and frightening than others. There
Well,
was a
actually,
period
I'm
in,
sorry. I'm sorry. I want to stop you right there because
okay,
some of the questions that I have for you, I feel are going to lead into what you're saying right now.
okay, all right,
So,
sure.
I'm gonna go ahead and get into those because I know for a fact that some of this is going to lead to that spiritual journey. So,
Sure.
um, okay. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put up a picture, one of the pictures that I've already showed you, and then we're going to do a brief recap of what you said you saw, and then I'm going to ask you some questions based off of that. So the first picture that I want to start with is this one right here. So
Okay.
this picture you said you saw, it seemed like artwork and images looking through a kaleidoscope.
Yes.
So, okay. Um, First, my first question. So now we're going to go back to your childhood, okay? Because we're going to kind of jump around here. We're not going to just, I'm not going to only ask questions pertaining to the book. I want to know about you as well. So,
Oh, sure.
so I want to go back to you as a kid. So I want to talk about the artwork. I want to talk about coloring. So, were you one of those kids who, like, I remember when I was a kid, there would be kids that were very, very careful about coloring inside the lines. And then you had other kids that didn't care. They would just color and it would be all outside the lines and they didn't really care. So, which kid were you? Were you the one that colored inside the lines or did you go outside of the lines?
I colored inside the lines,
You were inside of the lines.
always,
Okay.
very
Okay.
neatly.
So, as a kid, it really doesn't matter if you color inside the lines or if you're outside the lines. Your parents are going to celebrate it. They're still going to put that up on the refrigerator. It's still like a masterpiece to them. Um,
True.
but as we get older, the way that I started viewing coloring inside and outside the lines, that has changed. So for me now, especially like when I look at adults, and now I'm saying coloring, but this is more of a symbolic thing now. People who color inside the lines are people that they acknowledge and respect boundaries. And people who color outside of the lines, they're the people who decide, you know what, I'm not going to conform to the boundaries that other people have placed on me. So they are the ones that color all outside of the lines. Now, based off of the things that you've been through, are you still one of those people that colors inside the lines?
I am not.
You're still
I
not.
am not. No, I'm not.
So now you're outside the lines. You are,
Yes,
you don't conform to the boundaries. And I feel as though, especially when you become a creator or people who are just born as creators, we we don't color inside the lines because we don't do well with boundaries when it comes to to creating. I guess that how you feel.
yes, that is.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, my other question, just still sticking with the, what you say, a kaleidoscope. So, a kaleidoscope. So, a kaleidoscope, a purpose of a kaleidoscope is to give off like multiple reflections. So, let's now reflect on the multiple emotions that you had to deal with raising a child with type 1 diabetes.
Oh my goodness. Again, you have that spiritual journey, and I have a very close relationship with God, and He put a lot of tools and resources in place for me. The biggest resource was my family.
Hmm.
Oh, I didn't know what happened. Was my family, and my family, they were they were my lifeline. Latrice being a diabetic was something that we all endured, that we all celebrated, that we all got emotional over. And whenever anything was going on in her life, we as a family would get together to see how we were going to resolve it or how we were going to handle it and put interventions in place to keep it from manifesting one way or another. One of the biggest emotional challenges for me was to actually step back and release her and allow her to go to a diabetic camp so that she can learn how to manage her own diabetes. I had managed it for so long. I still would have control over sending the documentation to the endocrinology department, but at this point, she would be able to step in and test her own glucose and be able to provide her own injections. Prior to her going to the camp, I had a meeting with my family and explained that she would be away for 2 weeks. That had never happened before, night and day, and that, you know, we'd have to make sure that she had, I believe it was 3 outfits a day. She had to have rain gear, she had to have swim gear, she had to have stuff for camping, horseback riding, outside activities, pajamas, you name it. She had to have these things. And then my sister, it's actually 4 of us. We've named one the Glam Squad leader. She would make sure that everything was in place for Latrice. Of course, designer, already packaged up from ribbons to lace socks to be ready for her adventures. And everybody would have a part in what they would play for this. Now, to get her there, it was already emotional because this would be the first time that she would be away. And she's away for like a half a month. And there would be no communication other than writing her letters. And again, with the family, let's start writing these letters a week in advance. So she's getting her letters as soon as the mail call is given. She'll be one of the first ones to get her letters. She got letters. She got care packages. She received everything that would make her comfortable at camp. But what was surprising and emotional for me was to find out why Latrice was at camp, and she was the youngest diabetic at camp. She was 6 years old. She fell into a ketoacidosis state, which again is when you go into a coma because your blood sugars are out of control. Now, this camp is run by endocrinologists. There was a director of endocrinology, endocrinologists, doctors, and nurses, and they deal pretty much with your endocrine gland. And what happened was she went to the infirmary. I believe she was there for approximately 3 days, and the doctors were able to monitor just how far she had gone into ketoacidosis, and they performed the intervention that was needed and consulted with her doctor at Children's Hospital. By the time I got to camp on the last day for pickup, I was told of her condition and what she went through. And at first I was astonished. I'm like, oh my God, you know, why didn't somebody call? Why didn't she go to the emergency room? I was just, you know, astonished that this would happen. But the doctor said that is what this camp is for. It's to train the children how to deal with being a diabetic through life, and to train the medical professionals on how to deal with a crisis, no matter what age that child is. And I had to really take a step back and kind of, you know, absorb the fact that she got the best care. What would I have been able to do? And I was like 2 hours away. What hospital would she have gone to if I'm like, take her to the hospital, knowing that she really needed to be at Children's Hospital? You have that spiritual intervention, and you need that reassurance from God that, hey, yes, everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. That was a very significant event, and that was a very let me let go and let God take over moment. Because sometimes we think we have all the answers, but it's really God that knows best, and we have to absorb that. We need to sit there and manifest on the fact that He is the one who is guiding our lives, and He knows how things are going to turn out one way or the other. There was a very cool Good Friday, and Latrice had come to my sister's house for a fish fry. We would have a fish fry every Good Friday. My husband at the time, he was big on fishing out of the Chesapeake Bay area where we lived. So we always had this amount of fish that we were going to fry for Good Friday. Latrice was going to go out with some friends of the family, some cousins, going to the movies and having a good time, and then she was going to come back to the house. And the area that we live in is a very rural area. If you're not used to driving those roads, those dark hills can rock you to sleep because there are no street lights. There's not a lot of traffic. It's very, very soothing. It's a very solace ride. On the ride back, she could have been no more than 5 miles or less from home. She was in a near fatal car accident. And this is when she stood toe to toe between life and death. And God decided that he was not going to take her. He was going to spare her life. The book will tell you the vantage points of what happened on that day. You had me at my sister's house. At the time, her brother was 2 years old, just learning to be potty trained. And because we lived in a rural area, the diaper was very soiled. So I put it out on the front stoop of my sister's home, and I was able to see the car that the friend was driving, and it was a green Toyota Tercel. On that same night, my husband, who played in the band, he was out with some friends in the band, and on his way home, he said, man, you know, I'm like 5 minutes or less from home, and here's this big accident, and I can't get by because they've got the highway lights out. Because it's a rural area, they have to call in the highway administration to put the big spotlights out. They use that to guide the medevac in. So he's sitting there, and he said it was like the medevac was there. They had air support, ground support. We even have water rescue. So the water rescue team was there as well. And it had to be a better of maybe 50 different resources for this particular accident. They had the spotlights out to guide the helicopter in, and he's just sitting there and he's looking at all of this unfold. Now he says he saw the gurney being rolled over to an area where the community college was, and that's what they were using as the landing pad to airlift Latrice to the hospital. He did not know that was her. But then there was also 2 ambulances that were also on site, and the lights were on, but he said there was no sirens. And as the helicopter took off, the ambulance left, both with no sirens, and he said, ooh, that's not good if they leave and there's no sirens. So when he gets home, and Latrice was living in North Carolina at the time, and she was just up for the holiday weekend. And when he gets home, I'm telling him, hey, look, I had this talk with her. We put all of the rules in place, the house rules. She knows if anything goes wrong, she's supposed to call me. And here it is, day one. She didn't call. She's not here. And it's like 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. And he says, well, you know, maybe they were just out having fun, or maybe she got tired and she spent the night. And I said, my instructions were if she were to spend the night, she was to call. If she was someplace and she couldn't get home, she was to call and I would come get her. I have not received a call. So then he says to me, well, you know, what's the guy's name? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just cousins. I don't know everybody who was going out on this group date. So he says, you know, teenagers. Then he says, well, what kind of car was the guy driving? And I said, it was a green Toyota Tercel because I had seen that. That was my vantage point. Mm-hmm. So he slowly gets up like a mummy and turned towards me and was like, maybe you should call the state police to see if there have been any accidents in the area. So he's already thinking, this is not a good situation because I saw those ambulance leaving and the lights weren't on. He wasn't even thinking about the helicopter at that time. And I said, okay, I'll call in the morning. He says, no, call right now. He says, they're 24-hour operations and they will know if there's been any accidents in the area. And I called the sheriff's office first. The sheriff's office had to call the state police because they've had a lot of activity on this night. And then I called the state police. I described, you know, her age and what she looked like. And he said, and it was during the time of, you know, TLC and everybody wearing the baggy clothes or the oversized clothes. She didn't really have on an oversized outfit. She had on like a heavy black bomber jacket that her aunt had given her and some Guess jeans. And She had on these new Nike sneakers that were supposed to be all the rage. So they said that they had not come to a scene where there was any females, but there was a scene where there were two guys that were in an accident. One went to Calvert Memorial, and then one was airlifted to PG shock trauma. I called Calvert, and they said that that man had been released, and it didn't fit the name. And we decided we would go to PG Hospital anyway. So we went to PG, and there were a lot of accidents that night, and they had us sitting in this like chapel room, which was very disturbing for a very, very long time. And so the doctors would be in to talk to you shortly. Well, it probably was 45 minutes, but it seemed like it was all day. And we come back and we're like, the doctor has not come in, and we've not talked to anybody. And we want to know, had you had someone come in by this name? And again, they had not had that name, but then they sent us upstairs to this ward because they said it was a possible female that was coming in, and she would be coming up shortly, and we were to wait up there to identify her. We go up on this particular ward, and we're waiting, and then slowly you see this big mound of white sheets and blankets and stuff that are slowly approaching, and then the nurse is bringing this person almost past us, and I'm like, is that Latrice? And she backs up and she says, yeah, we have a Latrice Hawkins going in whatever this particular room is. And I'm like, that is not Latrice. It was just this big swollen amount of whatever. I don't even know what it was, but it didn't look like her. And then she, spoke and said that it was her. And I just kind of lost it. And I had to really talk to God. Like, I can't do this. I can't even look at her. I can't even speak to her. She looked like someone had put two plums on both her eyes, and the face was very swollen. You could hardly hear her talk. It was just mounds and mounds of bandages. So I don't even know how big it was. It looked like maybe she weighed 300 pounds. So I'm sitting here talking to God like, I can't do this. What am I going to do? I can't even look at her to talk to her. And God is like, yes, you will. You will go in there and you will talk to her like it's every day. You will not let her know that anything is wrong. You will be as comforting as you need to be, and you will be there for as long as you need to be there. That is the type of relationship that I had with God, and that's the kind of spirit that you need when you're in a traumatic situation. Because again, even there, I'm like, this does not look good. She does not look good. And then all of these mounds and mounds of sheets. I went to the nurse's desk. I wanted to know what happened to her and why is she so swollen. And the nurse said, well, the doctor will be in to see you, but it's been so many accidents that the night shift had rolled into the day shift, and he's still in the operating room. But what had happened, Latrice was laying down in a reclined position in the car. And thank God she had her seatbelt on, because had she not had a seatbelt on, she would have flew right through the windshield. The tree didn't even look that big, but they said she would have flown through the windshield. And when the tree hit, the guy must have fallen asleep. They said she hit about 60 miles per hour into the tree, and her face slashed into the left side of the quarter panel and split her face open near her eye, and she had to have her face reconstructed. And they said although the seatbelt saved her life, it split like a zipper 2 feet of intestines, her small intestines right down. And they said it took them almost an hour just to suction out the blood. They didn't even know where the internal bleeding was coming from. But again, with God, oh my goodness, Out of all the blood that she lost, she did not have to have a blood transfusion.
Hmm.
Now, I've mentioned two areas. She had to have constructive surgery to her face and her eye, and then they had to, stitch together that 2 feet. They actually had to cut it out and then reattach the rest of the intestines. So I'm talking to her and I'm telling her it's going to be all right. You're just going to heal, and then you're going to go back to your life. And she was like, but my back hurts so bad. She said, my back. I said, no, you've just been in a terrible accident. That's why your back hurts. She says, no, really, my back is killing me. Slide your hand under my back. So I slid my hand under her back, and it felt like a hot coal. That's how much inflammation it was. Thus, they didn't realize her back was broken at the L, 4, and 5 in 3 places. Again, the grace of God, because she could have been paralyzed. And she could not have immediately surgery on the back. By the time she came home from her surgery, her little brother was saying, oh, wow, look, she's got a zipper up the front and a zipper up the back, because she was in that much trauma during that accident. But look at God. There are people who are in accidents, don't have a scratch on them, and they're gone. She endured all that on top of being a type 1 diabetic, and God spared her life. Not only spared her life, a year later, she was able to walk, run, and carry on as though nothing ever happened. No one would ever even look at her and know that she was in an accident. The book talks about other episodes that she went through as well, other traumatic things that she went through. But when you have the power of God and your faith is strong, God will bring you through anything. And Latrice has been through probably 14 different medical procedures, surgeries. And if you were to look at her, you would not know that she has gone through anything, because God has always walked with her. God has always been with her to make sure that she has made it through everything that's gone on with her life. And with that, I have journaled every episode of what happened. I had to record a scale. I had like this crash cart to say what her blood sugars were 4 times a day, what her meals were. She had to have a certain amount of proteins, a certain amount of starches. All of these elements had to come together in order for her to be nursed back to health in the most healthy way possible, in order to prevent her diabetes from going completely out of control. And throughout all of the trauma that she went through, the diabetes never escalated one way or another. They remain intact. And this is a person who had such a strong faith in God. She was just ready to go with whatever God had planned for her. Like she said, if it was my time to go on Resurrection Friday, then it's my time. I mean, on the day that he was crucified, and then to be resurrected on Sunday. On Sunday, she was whole again. She was able to blink her eyes. She was able to let me know that she was okay. But again, she had to be completely rehabilitated. She had to learn how to walk, talk, feed herself. All of these things had to happen. And within a year, she had had her back surgery. Her back surgery consisted of her having 2 rods and 2 screws and 2 hooks that are still in her back today. But that helped her to be upright. It put her bones back in place, and it put her back on the path to having a full and healthy life. You can maintain being a diabetic throughout your life if you do everything that the doctor has instructed you to do, and if you take charge of your own care. If you document your own care, you know exactly what's going on with your blood sugars, your A1C. If you know all of the elements that are required in order for you to stay healthy, and you actually execute them, your life will be as fulfilling as Latrice's life is. I encourage you all to read the book, to find out about her spiritual journey, to know the importance of documenting.
Book, right?
All of these elements are in the book,
okay.
Even the documentation.
Okay.
So I urge you to get it. It's available on Amazon and Books A Million and Barnes & Noble.
Okay, and so this book is actually a book about hope as well. I mean, if you're documenting those types of things, and then you're chronicling the journey, and to talk about where she is now, which I actually want to get into that in a bit too. But so
Yeah,
this book really is a book about hope and about faith. Um,
yeah.
so okay, all right. I tell you what. So we're going to go to the next picture here. Okay, so
Okay.
right here, you said you saw a tattoo.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to go back to your childhood. So tattoos are something that it seems cool to kids, and oftentimes kids start wanting tattoos at an age that they're too young to get it, myself included. So, but as kids, we want to grow up too fast sometimes. So, my question to you is: were you that kid that just wanted to just grow up too fast?
I don't think so. I enjoyed my childhood. I enjoyed hanging out with my sister and brothers. I enjoyed the chaos that we got into. I enjoyed, I was also a track star. And I enjoyed running just for comfort. I enjoyed competing. I think I probably like doing things that were a little more structured than kind of out of off scope.
Okay. So, now my next question, I feel like you've probably answered it already, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just to see if I get a different answer this time. So, still we're dealing with the tattoos here. So tattoos are something, they are painful, but they are beautiful. I mean, if they're done right, they're beautiful. Um,
Yeah,
but but in the same way, as far as you writing this book, it had to be painful and beautiful for you at the same time. Painful because the reason that you were writing the book came from a painful experience, but there was a lot of beauty that's in the book as well, as far as um the fact that she has survived, the fact that
yeah,
there were so many different things, like the accident, for instance. It's not just about surviving the diabetes, it's about surviving life, period.
yeah, yeah.
So I want you to please tell me, like, I tell you what, tell me one thing that was painful for you as you were writing this book, and then tell me one thing that was beautiful for you as you were writing the book.
Oh, wow. I think the most painful part, because you want to protect your children. Want you don't want to see them experiencing the pain. And thank God I didn't, see her at its worst when she was in the accident, being hit by the tree and seeing the open wounds and whatnot. But it was extremely painful to know that one day she's going to see her face.
Hmm.
And I tried to combat that as best I could. My sisters and I were the kind, like, we always got mirrors, we've always dressed up, we've always got all of this extra bling and blang going on. So I told my sisters and anyone that entered the room, do not present a mirror, a compact, or anything that shows an image. Do not bring cellophane balloons because I don't want her to even see her reflection in the cellophane balloon.
Right.
And all of that went well. She went to many institutions. She started out at PG. She wound up going to Georgetown University Medical Center. She went to Holy Cross. She went to Manicare. All of these things with people visiting, she did not have an opportunity to see her face. Well, one day I'm coming to see her at Manicare, and when I get there, you could feel the tension when you walk through the doors of the facility. And I'm like, oh, something is not right, and I don't know what it is. And her girlfriend met me in the hallway and said, oh, Miss Susan, it was terrible. Latrice got up today for the first time to go to the bathroom, and she saw her face. And I'm like, oh, my God. I said, oh, my goodness. I said, well, I know that they have medical professionals and psychiatrists who are probably really working with her right now. She says, nobody said a word. They left her in there to her herself just to suffer and just endure it all. So I know I needed the strength of God to go in there to let her know that this is just a very mild period in life and that this too shall pass. But it's very difficult to tell someone who thinks that their whole face is completely destroyed that it will be okay one day. But I did my best, and through the grace of God, I let her know that what you're seeing is just the first stage of healing, and you still have these stitches and the swelling and the soreness and the scarring, but that will eventually fade. And through the grace of God and through prayer, one day you won't even know that it's there. Mm-hmm. It took many years, but over time, she was able to see that I was correct through the grace of God. But that was very painful to revisit, just in me expressing that on paper,
right?
What she was going through. That was horrible.
So was there beauty in the way that part ended, knowing that not only was she still here, but her face is completely clear? I mean, because you can't tell when you see her.
You certainly cannot. I think the beauty in all of this, even before the face is clear. My family members, most of the females are short, so we're super high heel wearers. You know, that's our thing. And Latrice was told, oh, because you broke your L4 or 5, you probably won't be able to wear heels again. And, you know, you'll probably like be a sneaker person. And the day that I saw Latrice with some super stacks on and some jeans running into the pharmacy, I was like, God, look at that. Look at that. That was, you know, less than 2 years that she's running into the pharmacy with these high heels on.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, that's just amazing. And then the other beauty is, again, I mentioned that she had what would be these 2 zippers, these long scars, one on the back and one on the front abdomen. Well, on the back, what she decided to do in the form of a tattoo, but not the way I described the tattoo in the photo, is that she's also an artist in entertainment, and her stage name was Catch 22, and she actually has this figure of this impression of herself at that age, as being around that 22 age, and she's holding a tray with her stage name 22, and it's actually a very nice piece of artwork on her back. She has a way of showing it. It's like, hey, I went through this and I got past it, and she's not afraid to show that scar off, and that was beautiful to see her embrace that.
Right. Okay. So I have one more question. I'm going to stick with this tattoo. Well, one more question about the tattoo. So
okay.
Tattoos, you know, typically, you know, people are like, oh, it's permanent. Now we know that they're not necessarily permanent, but
exactly.
Oftentimes people get tattoos with the understanding that this is going to be permanent. Well, type 1 diabetes, we thought for the longest time was something that was going to be permanent. But we now know that there is a way for a person to who has had type 1 diabetes to be diabetes free, as is Treese. So can you just tell me a little bit about that journey and what led her to becoming diabetes free?
Oh yes, my goodness. After many, many years of being a diabetic and going through a lot of different traumatic stages in her life, like I said, the ketoacidosis, very quick onsets of reactions and not being prepared for it. I'm like, whoa, you know, her life is just riddled with just a lot of episodes of the unknown. And with the unknown, you know, sometimes God say, hey, you know, things can possibly change for certain people, for certain diabetics under certain conditions. And there was an episode where Latrice could feel a reaction coming on very strongly, but she was not even in a position to help herself. She knew that she needed to have some juice or something sweet and she was like right at the refrigerator and was unable to reach out and get that juice. Her body just would not let her move forward. She was frozen. And with that, she actually went into a diabetic reaction. Her husband knew a lot of the signs that she would be going through, and he would be calling her daily just to check on her to make sure she was okay. And this particular day when he called, he knew that something wasn't right, and he could not get to her very quickly. He called his supervisor, and his supervisor was not too far from their home. He told the supervisor to go to his locker, to get his keys, to go to his house, and he said that she should probably be in the bedroom at the top of the stairs on the left. And when the supervisor got there, she was laying there in an unconscious state. And the supervisor called the paramedics. When the paramedics came, her blood sugar was so low that it was not even registering how low it really was. She knew that something had to be done. If the diabetes were coming on that fast, it's like there's got to be a solution. When she went to see her endocrinologist, they had a conversation about a possible pancreas transplant, which means she'd have to be on the National Organ Transplant Registry, and in the hopes that there would be a possible candidate, should be a candidate for a donor. And she registered, I want to say, August of 2020, and in September, almost a month to the date, August 14th, 2020, and then September 14th, 2020, she got that call. It's go time. We think that we have an organ and you're a good candidate for it. We want you to come down. We're going to do the cross check to make sure that everything balances out, to make sure that you are aligned with all of the criteria to get this transplant. And she was the candidate. It was a match. It was a perfect match. And look at God. So she actually had that surgery, and she went through a couple of episodes where there was some traumatic time, but I knew that God was going to bring her through because he always had.
Right.
And a month out, like for her birthday, October 14th, she was coming home with that new pancreas. God had blessed her with a pancreas after all this time. They did not remove the old one. The old one is still there, not working, not functioning well, but she has a brand new one that has served her well thus far. She didn't have any complications from it. There's still a couple of paralysis from her being a diabetic for so many years. But overall, if you look at the journey that God has taken her through, my goodness, what a testimony. What a testimony, and what hope for people who are going through something that's similar. What a hope for people thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a diabetic and I have no idea what to do. What hope is there for someone to say, hey, the blueprint is already out there. I might be able to use some of that just to sustain my own life, to ensure that my quality of life can be good. You can live with diabetes and you can have a fulfilled life. At one point, and I wrote in the book, that diabetes is not curable, but it's treatable. This is a cure. It may not be a cure for everybody, but it is a cure that people can at least explore and see if they have the options to be a candidate for. I urge you all to look at all of the opportunities, to see the technology that's out there and available for current diabetics. There's insulin pumps that you can use. It's almost like, you don't even have to do anything but switch your insulin pump from, every few days, and you don't have to give an injection 3 times a day. Or you want to look into becoming on the National Transplant Organ Registry and see if you're a candidate. You might even want to be a donor. This is things that you would be able to find out when you read the book. All of the unknowns, all of the ideas of hope, all of the ideas to live a better life if you are a diabetic. and to always remember to put God first, and He's going to see you through no matter what you go through in life, because He's always with you. You need not to ever be afraid. You never walk alone. God is always watching. God is always with you.
Yes, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. Okay, so we're going to go on to the last picture here, which is this one. And you said this one you saw tie dye. So with tie dye, tie dye is often something associated with hippies in the hippie culture. I remember seeing all kinds of pictures and videos in Woodstock, and everybody was wearing their tie dye shirts. So that's
True.
oftentimes something that's associated with hippies. Now, something else that's also associated with hippies, smoking marijuana. So you have seen marijuana go from being seen as a drug to nowadays where it is seen as a medicine in a lot of,
Right. Yeah.
from a lot of people. Now,
Yes.
um, with people who have type 2 diabetes, there are some studies that show that marijuana, just consuming marijuana, whether it's smoking, whether it's the edibles, but just consuming marijuana can possibly improve insulin resistance. But only people who have type 2 diabetes, not type 1 diabetes, unfortunately.
Right.
But so my question is, how do you feel about marijuana being used as a potential treatment for not only people who have type 2 diabetes, but other ailments as well?
If it's going to increase your quality of life, or if it's going to increase your health, then you should use it accordingly. Again, like you said, the same thing. People used to have a shot of whiskey or bourbon before they, cut a knife, a bullet out, with a knife. These are
Right.
things that they did back in the days before there was conventional medicine. And again, we're kind of going back to that as well. I've seen people to take herbs and crush them up. I don't know exactly what all the herbs would consist of. And they would pack those into a room, and eventually it would heal. Again, the marijuana is kind of like a herb, and it can do, many things. But if it's soothing, if it's helping, if it's increasing your quality of life, and you're using it for that purpose, and you're using that amount that's required, I don't think it's a problem with using it. I don't have anything negative to say about that.
Okay. All right. So one more question about that tie dye. So the tie dye, you're basically taking something that's blank and then adding a bunch of colors and patterns to it. Um,
Right.
the same way when you're writing a book, you start off with something blank and then you add a bunch of patterns and colors and words. You just bring it to life. I've spoken to a lot of people who said that I want to write a book, but I don't know how to start. I'm stuck. So, they're stuck at that blank place. The same way you got that blank t-shirt before you're able to add all those colors, that's where they're stuck. And they don't know how to move past it. So you already had the story. You already had all the information and you've been documenting things. But even with having all of that information, was it hard for you to move away from that blank place?
Because again, I talk about vantage points. That's the same thing with a book. At what point do you want to start? When do you want to introduce it? Do you want to just talk about, hey, she was a diabetic and this happened, and your timeline goes from the onset all the way through life? Or is there something significant that you want to focus on and then go back and let them know the history? And I started out just talking about the onset. But then God said it's significant for them to know that she was in this near fatal car accident first and survived. And then you give the backlash of what happened leading up to that point,
Okay.
and all of the trials and tribulations around along the way of that as well. And
Mhm.
that's what I started. it may have taken on maybe 4 different beginnings before I put that puzzle together, like you said, or those patterns together to say, I think this is the best way to present it. It does take time. It's something that doesn't happen overnight. It probably took me a better of 2 years to completely write it.
Hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. It's probably in addition to just trying to figure out structure and how you want to, as far as the timeline goes, but it also could take an emotional toll on you as well, because this is your baby, and then there
Oh,
you're
yes.
having to relive everything that she has gone through. So I can definitely see it having, taking that emotional toll on you, and just, and is this your first book that you've ever written?
Yeah, it is. I've written,
Okay.
like manuals and stuff for work, but this is my first manuscript that I've
Okay.
written. And as you indicate, it is very emotional, the rise, the journey, and I
Hmm.
talk about, the accident. But I think even what's more significant is the fact that you have this baby, this toddler. She was still in diapers when she became a diabetic.
Hmm.
And as she's growing, she's like, oh, she's doing things that are not nice. And how can I make her not do these things? And you kind of see that Stockholm syndrome that some people go through when they're being mistreated or abused. And it would be like, oh, I'm going to be good today. You don't have to give me that needle. We're friends. Oh, it would just tear my heart out. You don't have to. I'm going to be okay. And oh God, that was probably the worst until she got used to it. I try to pinch it up so you're not feeling it as much. But that was the most difficult thing to get used to, is injecting a baby.
Mm.
And my support system back then was very minimal because nobody wanted to give a baby a needle. I
Right.
only had one sister that said, if you can take it, then I can take it. But everybody else was like, don't even come around me. I don't even want to see you giving her that needle,
Right.
period.
Yeah.
And when it was first introduced, I said, oh, no, I'm not doing that. I can't give her a needle. That's not happening. And they're like, you have to give her these needles several times a day in case she won't live.
And that was
I'm
every
like,
day.
what do you mean? Every day.
Hmm.
I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you have to do that. You have to test this urine. You have to write it down. A typical day of, let's just say we're going to go to the park in the mall. I've gotten this, the little potty chairs have these measuring little things in them. You probably didn't pay any attention. So the measuring pot that went inside the potty chair, that became our little portable lab, if you will. So if we're going to the park or going to the mall, she has to go to the bathroom. She would go in that little measuring pot so I could see exactly what it is. I know how much urine went in. I would test it. And after we tested it, we would put it in the toilet. I would rinse it out, and I would put it back in the pack that we had. And then I've written down the date and the time and what it was. But this was our life. That was the norm. This was
Right.
something that was done every day to go somewhere. It wasn't like, oh, we don't have to do it today, or we'll do it tomorrow. You did that every single day. That was something that was required. That's the lab part of it. Then the nutrition part of it is to make sure that, if you were to have something sweet, it had to be something natural like grapes or an apple, and it only could be a medium-sized apple. And you have to, make sure that you have something that's going to off balance it. Oh, and the important thing, lifesavers. Lifesavers were really that, lifesavers. Because if you know you're going to be running around in the playground, or even when you got to high school and you were going to gym class, you need to pop a couple of lifesavers, which was about 10 calories per lifesaver. And, oh, what happened here? Are you there, Terrell?
Yeah, I'm still here. The screen go blank.
Okay. Yeah, it did. Okay, now we go.
Okay.
Yeah, so the lifesavers would be used just to give you that little burst of sugar if needed, if
Mhm.
you're doing something that was very active.
So you know what? You mentioned school. At what age did she start? Because she, of course, she had to start giving herself the shots, right? Like, how did that work when
Yeah.
in her early years in school? Was she able to give herself the shots?
No, we had a cycle for that. I would give her the shot in the morning,
Hmm.
and then in preschool, she would have a later dose. Like I would get off from work about 3, and she'd have a 3 o'clock dose, and then we would do one at night
Okay.
before bedtime. So you have a long lasting insulin, and then you have a quick one. You get the quick one in the morning. That's a quick shot. We've got the boost to start your day, and then the longer one would take you throughout a period. And I would say maybe from about first grade to third grade, the doses wouldn't change that much because again, your body, how much you're growing, how much you weigh, how tall you are, and she kind of, stayed the same in first grade through third grade.
Hmm.
And then also in school, there had to be that snack period as well. So she'd have to go down to the nurse's office and have a small juice pack and like, 2 butter cookies or graham crackers.
Okay. Got you.
That
Okay.
would sustain her until she got home.
Okay. All right. So what we are going to do now, because we're getting close to wrapping up. I try to keep the podcast like right around an hour. It's okay if we go a little bit over. It's fine. We're like an
Okay.
hour and a minute right now, but it's fine. But right now, I have a portion of the show called Flip the Script. I'm about to just flip everything around. I'm going to take the same 3 pictures that I sent you, turn them upside down. I'm going to tell you what I see. And
Okay.
then, based off of what I see, you can choose any one of those pictures and ask me a question based off of
Okay.
what I see. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So here is the tattoo that you saw. So upside down, the tattoo to me, it looks like 2 branches with arms that are growing from swamp water.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So the other picture, so right here, this is the artwork. The image is looking through a kaleidoscope. Now
Yeah.
this one upside down, it's the exact same thing. So I had to turn it on its side. So this is what it looks
Okay.
like. Yeah, this is what it looks like on the side. So um on the side, it kind of looks like somebody in the middle, and it looks like they're being pulled in every direction. And then
Oh,
it also looks like they have 2 elephants on their shoulders.
wow. Wow.
Okay, and then the final picture was okay. So this is the one where you said you saw tie dye, and
Yeah.
this is the picture upside down. So upside down, it looks like a woman hanging upside down but singing.
Oh, oh wow. Okay. All right.
All
Huh.
right. So which one of the pictures do you want to use to ask me a question?
Want to use the chaos one, pulling you in all directions with the elephant on
So
your
this
shoulder.
one right here. Okay. All right, I'm ready.
Can you describe a time in your life where you feel like you were being pulled in all directions while having 2 elephants on either side of your shoulder?
Yes. So I got a lot to choose from here. So um I remember in my early 20s, I was working at a job that I really, really did not like. I was dealing with some things outside of the job that were it was a lot on me. It was a lot on me. I remember at this point in my life, the only time that I would have any real peace was when I was in my car because
Wow.
yeah, because I and even then, as I approached my destination, whether it was work or if I was going back home, I would start to sink the closer I either got to work or the closer I got to home. just because there was so much chaos on, going on both ends. I felt trapped. I felt really, really trapped. At this particular job, at this time, I had, I remember I had trained the entire. I was working at a bank, and I had trained the entire branch, including the managers above me. I was training the supervisor for the position that I really should have been hired for, but I decided to just get in there and try to work my way up. They didn't allow me to work my way up, and
Wow.
instead they just made me train everybody. So
Oh
I
my
I knew
goodness.
more than everybody. So I really had a lot of weight on my shoulders at that job. I had a lot of weight on my shoulders at home. So the only time I was able to really find peace was when I was in my car. But in addition to me dealing with these things, I had a lot of people requiring a lot of things from me. So that's where I felt like I was being pulled in all of these different directions. And I didn't really have a
Hey.
lot of time for myself. And I remember going to my mother and I was talking to her about it. I said, Ma, I don't understand um, why at this moment I've been trying to find a new job. And at that point, every time I went on an interview, I got the job every single
Oh
time.
wow.
So now at this point,
Wow.
I'm putting in applications and nobody's even calling me back. And my mother said to me, she said, baby, she said, you may not want to hear this, but God has something at this job for you, and you're not going to leave until you get it. And one day, I'm gonna try to make this a really quick story. So one day I gotten actually before this day, I told my manager, I said, listen, me and the assistant manager don't get along. So please do not ever schedule us when it's only two people. So in the very beginning of the day, because this store was open from like 9 o'clock in the morning to 7 at night. So
Wow.
so at the very beginning in the morning and at the end of the night, at the end of the day, the end of the workday, there were only two people. We only needed two people to open, two people to close. Now, as the day went on, more people would come. But then when the day ended, of course, it was only two people. I told him, I said, please do not schedule me when it's just me and her because we don't get along. Well, this one particular day, I was really, really, I was already in a mood, and I get to work, and she is there, and I'm like, oh my
Oh my
God. I
God.
told him not to schedule me with her. So now I get in there, you can cut the tension with a knife. We're just sitting there, we're not really talking to each other. She was the assistant manager, who I trained, by the way, and
Wow.
and I had to use the bathroom. Now, the bank was inside of Shoppers Food Warehouse. So
Okay.
I had to use the bathroom. I was about to get up and walk. I had to walk all the way down the aisle to get to the bathroom. I got up and I said, I'll be back. She said, where are you going? I said, I'll be back. She said, where are you going? I said, I'll be back. She said, where are you going? I said, to the bathroom. I will be back. So she said, okay.
Wow.
She said, that's all I wanted to know. So I start leaving, and there's a guy who, a customer, my one and only time ever seeing this guy. He walked up to me and he said, hey, young brother, you got to let him know where you're going. And I said, no, I don't, because now I'm in the mood at this point. I said, no, I don't.
Right, right,
He
right.
said, yes, you do. I said, no, I don't. I said, she's trying to pull rank right now because the manager isn't here and she's the assistant manager. She's trying to pull rank. I said, any other time I get up, I tell people I'll be back. Nobody questions me. She's questioning me just because it's me and her here. And he
Wow.
said, he said, let me explain something to you. He said, I hear everything that you're saying, but let me explain something to you. If you have complete control over yourself first, then you can control anything and everything around you.
Hmm.
And I said, all right, man, thanks, appreciate it. And I walked off and I took about 5 steps before what he said hit me. And when that hit me, I honestly went from one of the lowest points in my life to one of the highest points in my life in a matter of seconds because
Wow.
I realized how much power that I had relinquished between that job and the things that I was dealing with at home. I realized how much power I had just given up, and I was allowing these things to control me. And when I decided to stop allowing these things to control me, for me to control me, to not try to control everything around me, but just to control me,
Right.
everything changed. And the next week, I had a job interview. And the week after that, they called me to tell me, you're hired. We want you to come work for us.
Wow.
I
Wow.
immediately
Look
thought
at
about what my
that.
mother. If I immediately thought about what my mother said to me, God has something at this job for you. You're not going to get it until you leave. I mean, until you're not going to leave until you get what
So
He
you
has
get
for
it.
you,
Right.
and that's what He had for me. So
Wow.
I stopped feeling like I was being pulled in every direction. I stopped feeling like those
Yeah.
elephants were on my
But
shoulders.
right, right.
Yeah,
Look at God. Like you said, once again, look at God.
exactly,
That's
exactly.
amazing.
Yes, yes.
That is amazing.
It definitely was. So okay,
Awesome.
we're going to get ready to wrap up. But before we do, I want to put
Okay.
up two more pictures here. First, I want to put up the cover of the book.
Yes. Okay.
This is the front cover. The name of the book is She's Type 1, The Adventures of a Type 1 Diabetes Toddler. And just want to put the back of the book up there too. So, they
Oh,
can.
thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
So, but before we get out of here, I want you to just let everybody know exactly where they can find your book.
The book is available. It's on e-Kindle at Amazon, Books A Million, and Barnes and Noble.
Okay. Now, I don't know if you want or care for people to get in contact with you if they want to speak to you about the book or even some type of speaking engagement just because you have so much I feel like you could be a motivational speaker because you just
I've heard people say that before. Yes.
yeah, you've been through so much, but to have such, your strength is so empowering and it's so inspiring, you
Thank
know.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you because I have been moved so much listening to you speak. So it'd be if for some reason somebody's listening and they feel that they need to reach out, is there a way that you could, would allow people, I mean, without, I know you probably don't want to put your phone
Sure.
number out there, but maybe email or social media.
Yes, I'll give you my email, and it's also in the book. It's about ABOUT Hawkins, HAWKINS, at gmail.com. About Hawkins at gmail.com.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And
So
again, I'm
before we get
Susan
out of
Hawkins Barton.
so before we get out of here, I got one more picture, and I want you to tell me exactly what you see here. Okay.
Okay. Is this podcast so dope? This podcast is so dope. Okay.
And I
It
couldn't
is so
agree
dope.
more. Well, thank you. I couldn't agree more.
Yes, this was very encouraging, and I hope that it inspires people to really do justice with their own health.
Yes, yes, I hope so too. I just want to thank you so much again I want to thank you for your transparency. I want to thank you for your strength, for you just being so resilient. Um, you're such an inspiration. You really are. You and Treese both. I
Thank you
interviewed
so much.
Treese. I interviewed Treese last week for because of course she's running for lieutenant governor of Maryland.
Yes, of Maryland, go my political princess. Yes.
Right. But I've known Tree since I was in high school. And um
Awesome.
because I used to date her cousin. And
Oh,
that's
oh
how
yes,
we
she did
met.
mention that. Yes, yes. Okay,
That's
she
how we
did
met.
mention that.
Yes.
Yes.
So me and Treese were able to build a friendship. She's always been like a big sister to me. So
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
and then we
Good,
both
good.
we had music in common because I was rapping as well. So we just had that
Oh,
connection.
okay.
Yeah,
So
we've
you know
always
about Catch 22 then.
absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So,
I'll
but
have to get you a copy of that book. Yeah, that tattoo is
oh
in that book as well. So I'll have to get
yes,
you a copy of that.
I'm definitely getting the book. But you know what? I didn't know all of that story. Even
Oh,
knowing her for all of these years, I did not know all of that story. And as
oh
I'm
yes.
sitting here
Mhm.
listening to you tell the story, I was thinking to myself, Treese is one of the strongest people that I know.
Indeed,
I mean,
is
her
she's
story is so
really,
amazing.
oh, it is just, I mean, it is something that reaches so many different cultures and age groups. It's
Right.
something that a lot of people can benefit from because, you know, diabetes is reaching epidemic proportion at this point. And a
Hmm.
lot of people have no idea how to deal with it, why they need to document. It's not something like a cold, okay, I can just, you know, do these things and then I'm going to be all right in a, you know, a couple of days. This is your life. Like me saying, you know, I'm talking about that piece of that the potty chair to take around the measuring element of it. People are like, I'm not doing that. They're like, I'm not going to do that. But in
Hmm.
order for you to actually be able to call and say, these are the numbers, these are the stats, you have to do that.
Right. Hmm. Yep. So, well, highly encourage everybody, please, please, please go get that book. And if you need some encouragement, or if you just want to, reach out, maybe get Susan to come out. And I feel weird saying Susan, Miss Susan. I'm going to say Miss Susan. I just feel weird saying that.
Susan is fine. Susan
But
is fine. It's fine.
but if you want her to speak at an engagement, I mean, just please don't forget to just reach out to her. Again, your email is about Hawkins at you said Gmail, right?
Yes.
Okay, yes,
Yes.
about Hawkins at gmail.com. Okay. All right. So we're going to wrap up. I just want to thank you again. And for everybody else that's watching, y'all be good to each other.